Gentlemen, you will now be disarmed.
You can try.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and as requested, today we'll be exploring the 2004 period action-adventure monster movie Van Helsing, written and directed by Stephen Sommers. Inspired more by the universal horror monster properties of the 1930s and 40s than the original sources written by the likes of Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley, the film stars Hugh Jackman as Gabriel Van Helsing, Richard Roxburgh as Dracula, Kate Beckinsale as Anna Valerius, Shula Hensley as Frankenstein's monster, and David Wenham as Carl, Helsing's friar assistant. Loosely based on the character Professor Abraham Van Helsing, featured in Bram Stoker's 1897 horror novel Dracula, the film follows the adventures of the vampire hunter as he sought to defeat his arch-nemesis, Count Dracula. But unlike the original story, which solely tracked the aged polymath doctor's attempts to bring the vampire lore to his knees, the film reinvents the traditional story and explores a new spin on the tale, introducing us to a collection of monster-related Gothic narratives from the 19th century. After the success of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, which were themselves adaptations of Jane Webb's 19th century horror novel, The Mummy, or A Tale of the 22nd Century, Sommers wanted to do another monster film, but felt that all the classic characters such as Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman had been done to death. Realizing that a mashup where all the monsters were put together in the same story hadn't been done since the 1940s, Sommers devised a new story that could achieve this. The result is a film that contains Dracula, the brides of Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, Igor, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and of course Van Helsing, all duking it across Europe in a homage and tribute to the monster movies that inspired them. This was essentially the Universal Pictures Dark Universe franchise, before Marvel Studios prompted everyone to copy their cinematic universe with their Avengers series. Despite being based on the Universal horror properties, Sommers was adamant that he didn't want to make this a horror movie on any level. He wanted to create a romantic, action-adventure monster movie. The end product is a film that owes as much to the swashbuckler film starring Errol Flynn as it does to the monster films of Universal, with a touch of Indiana Jones and James Bond thrown in for good measure. Much like Sommers' two Mummy films, Van Helsing made heavy use of CGI, courtesy of Industrial Light and Magic, as well as massive sets, miniatures, makeup, and prosthetics to achieve the desired effect.
Van Helsing?
Do you like to fly?
The design of Dracula's brides alone took almost a year to complete. The idea was to find a balance between the beautiful and the monstrous. The brides had a human form, but they wanted to make sure that when they transformed into their vampiric form, they were hideous and yet still recognizable, with the same actors, the same performances, and the same facial gestures. They eventually came up with what they termed the hybrid bride, where they combined practical effects with computer graphics. The head and hair were heavily disguised with makeup and prosthetics, while their bodies were covered in a blue-screened suit. The computer-generated bodies were then combined with breakthrough motion capture technology developed by ILM, which had never been used before, to integrate the live performance of the actors with the CG motion capture. This allowed the brides to fit in with the complex aerial photography, with great cinematography by Alan DeVue, who used cable cameras whizzing above the village as the destruction reigned below, in what is one of the most exciting sequences in the film. When it came to the design of Frankenstein's monster, they wanted it to feel like the audiences were meeting him for the first time. But because Frankenstein's monster is such an icon, they didn't want to upset the fans. Therefore, he had to have a flat head, bolts on his neck, and Doc Martens on his feet. Other than that, they were able to play with it and decided on a steampunk aesthetic, and to this end, they made sure that it looked like the actor Hensley to give him more humanity, but still applied heavy prosthetics on his face and gave him arm and leg extensions. But the biggest change made to the 1931 iteration of the monster is that this version can talk, keeping it more in line with Mary Shelley's original from the novel, which made him more relatable. Once again, the addition of another famous Universal monster icon, in the form of the Wolfman, created more challenges for the wizards at Industrial Light and Magic. Not only did the teams have to create a realistic rendition that paid tribute to its source material and its many adaptations, but they also had to reinvent the creature for modern audiences. With the transformation sequence, Sommers said, "We've seen men growing hair so many times. No matter how you do it, stop motion or CG, it's been done to death. So we came up with our own way by asking, what if the man started ripping his skin off to reveal a werewolf underneath? Not only does the creature come from the man, but the man also comes from the creature, and we see these two sides of the coin play out with Velkin, who is cursed to live a never-ending tango of twisted duality." The CGI was also aided by the physical performance of Will Kemp, who played Velkin and was a ballet dancer before making the change to acting. The contortions of his body into incredible shapes during the transformation sequence was all real, with prosthetics and CGI integrated on top. But even when the actor wasn't transforming in a shot, the filmmakers would still get him to perform his role as the wolf and then put the effects on top before removing the actor.
Dr. Jekyll, you are wanted by the Knights of the Holy Order
It's Mr. Hyde now.
for the murder of 12 men, 6 women, 4
4 children, 3 adults, and a rather nasty massacre of poultry.
Unlike Dracula's wives and Frankenstein's monster, which were mainly brought to life with the help of the actors, prosthetics and practical effects, Dr. Jekyll's alter ego was a 100% CGI creation. This, I feel, is one of the main reasons that it's the least impressive creature in the entire film. Mr. Hyde was envisaged as a grotesque backstreet British thug and was rendered entirely with CGI. Shula Hensley, who also plays Frankenstein's monster, was the body double during the scene shot with Hugh Jackman, and his body movements were later recorded with motion capture, while the facial performance was based on Robbie Coltrane's voice acting as Mr. Hyde in the recording studio. When it came to the concept of the character, the director also wanted to create his own version of Van Helsing, and changed the name from Abraham Van Helsing to Gabriel Van Helsing. Using the original vampire hunter as a starting point, he decided to focus on the beginning of his career by making him into a younger, charismatic and divine hero that could take on the classic Universal monsters. The film opens in 1887 Transylvania, as Dr. Victor Frankenstein, played by Samuel West, cries out,
It's alive!
The opening scene in black and white contains both set designs and plot elements directly from the original Universal Monsters 1931 version of Frankenstein, and is a blatant homage which sets the visual tone for the rest of the film. Frankenstein and Dracula, who is played by delightfully over-the-top Richard Roxburgh, bring the creature made up of dead people to life, with a little help from their henchman Igor, played by Kevin O'Connor. Before Frankenstein could celebrate his creation, he's killed by Dracula, just as an angry mob descends on Castle Frankenstein. The monster escapes with the body of his father and mourns his passing, only to then have the windmill they were in burnt to the ground by the angry mob, apparently taking Frankenstein's monster with it, much like the end of the 1931 version. The titular Van Helsing, played by Wolverine, is then finally introduced a year later in Paris, hunting down Mr. Hyde, formerly the alchemist Dr. Jekyll, who had become subsumed by a serial-killing alter ego. After a battle in Notre Dame Cathedral, Van Helsing kills Mr. Hyde by throwing him off the roof. He then returns to the Vatican, where we find out Van Helsing was an amnesiac who hoped to atone for forgotten sins by slaying evil for a secret organization within the Catholic Church, known as the Knights of the Holy Order. I thought it was interesting to note that the scenes in the Vatican are an ode to James Bond, with the Knights of the Holy Order standing in for MI6, while the monk and inventor Carl, played by David Wenham, acted like Q, introducing Van Helsing to an extensive range of technology designed to kill vampires and werewolves. After giving us some context as to their role in the world to defeat evil within the shadows, the Knights of the Holy Order send Van Helsing off on a new mission to Transylvania, accompanied by his gadget man Carl to kill Dracula and protect the last members of the ancient Romanian Valerius family and 9 generations of their kin that died fighting him and would be condemned to purgatory if he lived. Meanwhile, Princess Anna and Prince Velkin Valerius, played by Kate Beckinsale and Will Kemp, attempt to trap and kill a werewolf controlled by Dracula, but fail, with Velkin and the werewolf falling off a cliff. Though the werewolf died after being shot with silver bullets by Velkin, Anna's brother, who had been infected, would go on to take the creature's place as a bestial servant of the vampire overlord. Van Helsing and Carl arrive in the Transylvanian village run by Anna Valerius and meet the rowdy mob that had burnt Dr. Frankenstein and his monster to the ground, right before being attacked by Dracula's 3 brides, Verona, Marischka, and Alira. During the battle, Van Helsing kills Marischka with his repeater crossbow dipped in holy water. Anna, Van Helsing and Carl then return to the Valerius family castle, where Anna's brother Velkin is revealed to not only be alive, but also a werewolf that would eventually be completely consumed by his animalistic nature. Though Van Helsing tries to kill Velkin, Anna intercedes, and as Velkin escapes, they follow him to Castle Frankenstein. It's here that we discover Dracula was attempting to replicate Dr. Frankenstein's experiments, using Velkin as a conduit, to give life to his thousands of undead children that hung from the ceiling in grotesque egg sacs. While Anna tries to rescue Velkin, who is now too far gone to recognize her, Van Helsing encounters Dracula, who seems to know him, addresses him as Gabriel, and offers to restore his memories. This is the first indication we get that Gabriel Van Helsing was actually a lot older than he realized, hinting to the possibility that he was probably at least as old as Dracula himself. When Anna and Van Helsing escape Castle Frankenstein and take refuge in a cave below the windmill destroyed in the opening scene, they stumble on the tortured Frankenstein monster. Given that Dracula wanted to copy Dr. Frankenstein's success of bringing the dead back to life, the monster becomes key to Dracula's plans to instill life in his undead children. When they attempt to flee Transylvania and make for Budapest, Dracula sends his remaining brides after them, as well as the Wolfman, in a fantastic chase sequence, which has aged incredibly with all its techno-wizardry. Dracula's bride Verona is then killed in the chase, while Van Helsing and Velkin exchange silver bullets for bites, infecting the former and mortally wounding the latter, before Anna is knocked unconscious and kidnapped by Dracula's last bride, Elira. In Budapest, Van Helsing agrees to trade the monster for Anna, and hides the monster in a cemetery before going with Karl to save Anna from a masquerade ball held by Dracula at his summer residence. Though Karl and Helsing manage to infiltrate the ball, which is populated with Dracula's vampire minions, and rescue Anna, during the conflict, Frankenstein's monster is captured and taken to Dracula's castle to facilitate his ultimate plan. Van Helsing, Anna and Karl return to Transylvania, where Karl, who had been researching the history of Dracula and the Valerius family, explains that Dracula was the son of Anna's ancestor that was murdered by the left hand of God, otherwise known as the Archangel Gabriel, aka Van Helsing. Moments before his death, Count Vladislas made a deal with the devil to avoid death and became a vampire. And since Anna's ancestor couldn't kill his own son, he was banished to an impenetrable fortress instead. But unbeknownst to the Valerius family, the devil gave Dracula wings, enabling him to escape. We're also informed that the only thing that could kill Dracula was a werewolf, something that Gabriel was on his way to becoming. Wanting to stop Dracula and his nefarious plans, Van Helsing, Anna and Karl use a map on the wall of the Valerius family castle, combined with a piece that Van Helsing brought with him from the Vatican, to open a portal directly into Dracula's fortress, where they see Frankenstein's monster being prepped for the experiment. Karl and Anna run off to find a cure for the werewolf curse, as Van Helsing freed the monster, but not before the experiment gives life to Dracula's children, who proceed to wreak havoc across the countryside. Van Helsing then confronts Dracula, who confirms that Van Helsing is the Archangel Gabriel that killed him over 400 years ago. Knowing that the only way to stop the vampire was to transform, Van Helsing turns into a werewolf, while Dracula took on his hellbeast form. Karl and Anna retrieve the werewolf cure, kill off Igor and Elira in the process, and make their way to the laboratory just as Van Helsing ripped out Dracula's throat. With Dracula dead, all his newly resurrected offspring begin to die, bringing an end to his kind. Anna then injects Van Helsing with the cure, only to be killed by him before he transforms back to his normal self. With the Valerius family curse destroyed, Van Helsing and Karl cremate Anna's body on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Finally, free from purgatory after Dracula's death, Anna appears in the heavens with her family, as Van Helsing and Karl head off to their next adventure. Van Helsing fared quite poorly with critics, but performed well at the box office, and has since become something of a cult favourite. Though it's true some of the CGI hasn't aged well, such as Mr. Hyde, a lot of the special effects have, and the incredible work by ILM certainly paved the way for many films to come. What I really appreciate about the film is that it did a decent job of doing what other massive film franchises have sometimes struggled to do: create an entertaining, internally consistent story that juggles multiple characters and franchise properties within a single movie. We could only imagine what would have happened if Hugh Jackman's monster-hunting Gabriel Van Helsing had teamed up with Brendan Fraser's archaeologist-adventurer Rick O'Connell, and I hope that it's still not too late to see this play out. Well, that's all for today, folks. A huge thanks to everyone who requested we explore Van Helsing. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content, and if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film and Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.